In Judaism, one of the loftiest ambitions we have is related to a verse found in our Torah portion. V'halachta bidrachav. Within the description of the covenant, the blessings and the curses of Parshat Ki Tavo, the Torah says that Yekimcha Hashem lo la'am kadosh. God will establish us as God's holy people. Ki tishmor et mitzvot Hashem Elokecha v'halachta bidrachav. As long as you keep the commandments of God and walk in God's ways. So what does it mean to walk in God's ways? How is this possible? One of the more famous understandings of this is the interpretation found in rabbinic literature that the goal is to try and compare our activities to God's. The Talmud in Masechet Shabbat 133b, Havei domelo. Try and emulate God. Be similar to God. Mahu chanun v'rachum, af ata heyeh chanun v'rachum. Just like God is compassionate and merciful, we should be compassionate and merciful. This is what it means to follow in God's footsteps, walk in God's ways, try and be our best to be like God. So this makes sense, very lofty, very ambitious. At the same time, it seems to be missing something, because walking in God's ways should require something more than having attributes or compassion and empathy and mercy. Rabbi Mark Angel notes that at the root of these qualities is humility. We have to have self-respect, we have to look out for others, and a religious attitude that is humble and concerned with those around us. He notes, however, that Rabbi Chaim Pelagi, a 19th century Turkish Torah scholar, points out, this is great, but the commandment is to walk in God's ways, not to feel in God's ways, not to act in a way where we have attributes of humility and respect and empathy. How do we walk in God's ways? And Rabbi Pelagi suggests that really when it comes to walking in God's ways, it's a requirement to act on these attributes. Rabbi Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin of Volozhin, known as the Netziv, expands upon this idea and reminds people, admonishes us, Shelo yeh minhag kedusha v'chasidut, that we shouldn't allow our efforts at piety and holiness, mesir mi ma'aseh ha-mitzvah, to divert us from action, afilu ma'aseh ben adam lachavero, including actions between people, between man and one's fellow. Following in God's ways requires us to sometimes set aside our own quest for holiness and attend to the needs of others. V'halachta bidrachav, the Netziv writes, following in God's footsteps, shehu iskei b'nei adam. Sometimes that is following in normal, ordinary human activities. Walking the walk and attending to what is needed, action, in front of us, that's how we emulate God. In this vein, Rabbi Angel creates a distinction between real godliness and what he calls fraudliness. Real godliness is an authentic attempt to do the right thing. It's not about showing off. It's not about a religious attitude. It's about action. Religious fraudliness is when the activities are not motivated by the proper action, and the actions sometimes are about calling attention to one's supposed religiosity. It's about trying to act in ways that create for ourselves and generate this inspiration in others of the authentic religious experience. An example is found in the book City in Its Fullness by Shai Agnon. And within the book, there's a conversation between two men who attend a prayer service led by a chazan with a beautiful voice. And in describing their experience at the prayer service, they marvel not about the voice and the sound and the music, but they say what we heard was prayer. Even with the beautiful music and the beautiful melodies, what emerged out of it was prayer. Not the religious experience per se, but the concept, the action of prayer. It's trying to get down to the ma'aseh ha-mitzvah, the action, what's necessary. Tefillah, of course, should be beautiful and inspiring, but it's not just beautiful and inspiring to listen to. It's the action of avodah, of the service of the heart. in our attempt to get close to God. And that's what it means to walk in God's ways, to use our God-given talents, to use our choices, to raise ourselves and others to a more authentic spiritual level of walking in God's ways and performing our responsibility as Jews. So let's walk. Let's act in ways that elevate ourselves and inspire others. Let's genuinely follow in God's footsteps. This is a lesson that's at the core of our Jewish tradition. It's the core of our responsibility. It's something that has the capability of raising ourselves and all of those around us higher and higher and higher. So let's take that walk together.